So basically all I've ever wanted to do was draw. And all I've ever drawn were people and, well, dogs. And this is since I've been a very small child. I would combine the dogs and the people, sometimes like circus stuff. But anytime I see a human being, this is what makes me happy. And I found out as I got older that you could actually go into the field of drawing, and that this was something that people could actually do. And I also found out that if I went into something called fashion illustration, that I could actually make a living for myself. I found this out because when I was really little, and some of you who are of a certain age will remember in the New York Times on Sunday, every Sunday, there were these drawings in the second section that were the most beautiful drawings on the planet. There were these women doing this, and this was absolutely amazing. And as I got older and started to look into this more, I said, this is okay. I'm gonna pursue this. Turns out that FIT, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology, was the mothership for basically all of fashion. There were a couple of other peripheral schools, but FIT was the major one. At that time, the building was about this big. It was a 2-year school. You could take maybe a half a dozen different things. Basically, it was fashion illustration, fashion design, buying and merchandising. We didn't talk to them. And so that's what I decided to go in for. Hi. And I stayed in fashion illustration for 20 years, from the 60s into the 80s, when technology kicked in and photography kicked in, and then digital art kicked in. And if you will look around at any of the newspapers or magazines, you will see drawings, but they don't have that grace or that charm or the beauty of what it was. So since the entire industry was collapsing in on itself, my husband and I decided we would move out to the house that we had in Sag Harbor and kind of reinvent ourselves. So we moved everything out, which was pretty bizarre because we was combining a studio that we had in Brooklyn, plus the house that was filled with stuff, plus an outdoor studio, and we just like lumped everything in. And I decided, okay, what do I do now? And it turns out in Southampton, there's a group called the Southampton Artists, which had pretty much just been formed, and they started a life drawing program. I said, okay, that'll work. And I got, oh, well, this is fashion illustration from back then. From back then. And if you look at some of this, the gray tone on the pieces is something called Bende paper. This is, you're laughing, it wasn't funny. It was this horrible, horrible stuff that you had to cut up in pieces and affix to it because there was something called a halftone, which was an expensive thing to do. Color was out of the question, but a halftone was a little more expensive, and they didn't want you to have to do that. You're nodding, yeah, okay. So we used Bende paper to create tonal values in the drawings. Okay, never want to see that again in my life. When I first moved out here, I discovered that there was a call for illustration. There was a Western wear place in East Hampton. His name was Robert Curtis, and he sold boots and hats and cowboy belts and stuff like that. And somehow we met, and he asked if I would do catalogs for him, so I did that. I also did jewelry for a while for the designers who actually did the designs for Yves Saint Laurent or Dior, because those designers didn't do that. They farmed it out. And I sort of went along as an indentured servant to wherever this guy went. He was the designer for all these guys. Basically doing the constructive anatomy, which is what we learned at FIT. FIT taught you how to draw. You went in thinking that you were on top of the world. You found out not so much. And you really had to learn from bone up how to draw the human form. But it wasn't just drawing a human form. It was drawing a human form that had elegance. It was drawing a human form that had movement. And this was the entirety of learning how to draw in a style different than just what most people do. It wasn't rendering, which is that very detailed stuff. These were quick observational drawings. I did runway drawings, which meant I had to have a drawing of the clothing looking good in about 3 minutes for the model to come down, turn around, and come back. And then it was handed off to the person sitting near me, and they would send it out to either be published or to do whatever. So moving out here and trying to figure out what to do with myself, I decided to go with the life drawing. This is pretty much what I did for fashion, because we used a lot of, later on, we used a lot of pen and ink. And so I was able to translate that into the drawings for figure. What I teach is something called form in front of form in front of form, meaning that whatever is coming towards you is the primary form, whatever is coming back changes and becomes smaller, so that you wind up with something called foreshortening, which is wonderful, because when you really understand foreshortening, you can make drawings move better. You can make them look like they're actually solid and they actually have some sort of surface tension. This was a figure of a woman in a kimono, obviously, that I do out of a studio that I work in Georgia, which is right on the beach. It's a tower studio. There's a 360-degree view. There's Georgia Pond on one side, and there's the ocean on the other. It's not bad. So, and we've gone down to the beach to work. Yeah, it's nice. I have all kinds of models. I teach classes here, right in here. It's all life drawing, although now I'm teaching basic drawing classes. I teach at the Southampton Cultural Center and at the Parish Museum. And I just started doing classes at Dan Weldon's studio, which is in Bridgehampton. And so it's always a live model. Oh, this is what I talk about with foreshortening. If you get the forms correct, the front of the form will come towards you, and it will just recede as it goes away, and it'll actually make it look like the person is lying down. If you don't get that foreshortening thing, the person will look like they're standing on their head. So you have to be really careful about compressing the middle of the body. So if you ever decide that you are interested in learning how to draw, contact, you can call here. The classes we do here are on Fridays from 3 to 5. If you are interested, if that doesn't work for you and other days work for you, you can always call me. And this is a drawing in red Conti. I usually work in black charcoal and Conti. You know what Conti is? Most of you know? Okay. Conti, it's called Conti crayon. It's not really crayon. It is an oil-based pigment. It's relatively hard, and it just has beautiful line when you move it. The shadows are usually done with charcoal. This is a red Conti. This particular model has a skin tone that every time I draw her in black and white, I'm never satisfied. And when I started doing her just in the red Conti, it was just a whole different world. All of a sudden, yeah, this is what she looks like. I do watercolors also. I brought in some watercolors. I don't teach watercolor because I can't really explain what I'm doing, but I just do it. This is foreshortening. So if you decide you want to learn to draw, you know where to come.
Any questions first? Were you ever interested in or influenced by Toulouse-Lautrec?
Always. Any of the graphic artists from the 19th century, even from the early 20th century, that had such an amazing grasp of shape and form and everything like that. And Toulouse-Lautrec was brilliant. But it's not just Toulouse-Lautrec. There were so many other graphic artists. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but it's not so much color. I'm not a great colorist. I do that basically red, yellow, and blue, and variations on that. But having the graphics is what I really look for. Yeah, meh. Run down a little bit. I like his drawings for sculpture. They are quite beautiful, but more graphically. Anybody else? Yeah,
Did you like that pressure? You said of drawing in 3 minutes and just...
loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. In fact, when you do the drawings, we start with 3-minute poses, just quick. There are some classes you go into and they'll start with like 1-minute poses, sometimes 60 seconds. I mean, or like 30 seconds, 10 seconds. The models go nuts from that because they're constantly changing. And also, I find it disorienting, and they say, well, it's to get you to loosen up. 3 minutes is good. You get to actually not fully envision it on the page, but you get to actually put something on. If I have to draw a 20-minute drawing, it's like I have to just slow myself down. Yeah, it's also, I'm sort of the adult representative of attention deficit, so I can, work really quick. It worked out well. Anybody else?